Once as a teenager, I asked my mother, and I was driving home and I was just so upset, and I didn't want to say anything because I knew my mother, and I just started crying, and I just said, "Why is he here?" And I kind of saw the pain on her face, and I knew I shouldn't have asked. But she just said, I had no choice. It was just somebody who was very low functioning and was just, was never going to be able to really communicate and take care of himself.
Welcome everyone to Family Comes First. I'm Vincent J. Russo.
And I'm Victoria Roberts-Drogin. Thank you for joining us today. When a child is born with special needs, it's usually the parents that bear responsibility for that child. But what happens when the parents are no longer living or able to take care of their child? Is it then the siblings' responsibility? Are they available, willing, able?
Important questions, Victoria. In my special needs practice, we meet with many families who plan for the future. But unfortunately, many more deal with these issues in crisis. It all starts with family and the relationships that are created from birth. When the parents pass away or are in failing health, the siblings or one of them will be asked to step up to the plate. This is the time when the siblings are truly tested. I've seen the love and dedication of siblings for their brother or sister with special needs, helping their brother or sister live with dignity.
You know, Vincent, when we talk about children and siblings, just as daughters are usually the family members who care for their aging parents, sisters are usually the family members who look after siblings with special needs when the parents no longer can. Today, we will share the story of one sister who has taken on the role of guardian for her brother with special needs.
Yes, Victoria, Rebecca Kooper is a loving and caring sister to her brother Billy. For a time, she not only had to see to her brother's needs, but also the needs of her father Max, who had dementia. Rebecca became Billy's guardian after the death of her parents.
It must have been very difficult for her. However, she did not have to go it alone. There are organizations out there to help siblings like Rebecca. And joining us today is Aaron Leibowitz, the Executive Director of Adults and Children with Learning and Developmental Disabilities, ACLD, and Vincent's partner, Frank Buquicchio, of Vincent J. Russo and Associates, PC, who is a special needs planning attorney.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to start with you, Aaron, and I'd like you to first talk about your organization, ACLD.
Well, ACLD, like many of the organizations serving individuals with developmental disabilities, was actually started by families in the late 1950s. It's grown into a multi-service organization that offers medical and psychiatric care, residential homes and apartments, day services, early childhood education, recreational services, really spanning the whole range of ages and needs.
That's a mouthful. What a list of services you just gave us. How many people are you serving?
About 3,000 at any given point, some with comprehensive services, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and others who come for particular services, medical, job services, service coordination, so people use us in different ways.
Frank, I have a question for you on the legal side of the issue. Who has the right to make decisions for an adult with special needs? Is it automatically the parent, and if not the parent, is it automatically a sibling?
No, nothing is automatic in this area. Under New York law, once we turn age 18, we're presumed to be competent adults. For those who aren't able to make those decisions, however, then we have to go for a guardianship. A guardianship is going to be two-part, potentially. There's guardian of the person, which will allow for healthcare decision-making, things like housing, personal types of needs. And then there's guardian of the property, which deals with financial management of the person's assets.
And at what point should a parent or a sibling consider seeking advice on a guardianship or putting one into place?
If we're talking about somebody who's under 17, somebody developmentally disabled, mentally retarded, as an example, I think probably about 6 months before their 18th birthday would be a good idea to start the process, because there's paperwork involved, there's court hearings, so it'd be a good idea. You want to have as little delay as possible. Once you hit 18, you want to kind of hit the ground running. If we're talking about an adult who lacks capacity and we don't have a guardianship in place already, then I think they should be doing it now, yesterday.
Immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Because right now, with no guardianship, if you have somebody who lacks capacity to make decisions for themselves, there is nobody legally who can do that for them.
Terrific. Aaron, at what point should a family start thinking about housing and placement and those types of options?
Consistent with what Frank is indicating, it needs to start earlier than most people really begin thinking about it. When families have children in secondary schools, they're really immersed in that world of education and educational placement issues, but that's really the time to begin to think about the transition from school to adulthood, because there are very significant changes in systems, in supports, and availability of programs and services that's very different than their experience with the educational system. So I would say by 15 or 16 years of age, families should begin thinking about that. They should make themselves known to the Office of Mental Retardation and Developmental Disabilities that they will be having needs. It may not be immediately residential, but at least they're listed as people who are registered for those services. They need to familiarize themselves with the range, and we are blessed here on Long Island with many excellent organizations like ACLD who do work with people with developmental disabilities. So there are organizations close to home that you can be in contact with and become involved with. So I think the process begins early. And that it's an evolving process that each individual family has to find their unique access point and how they use those services.
And I could see at a practical level the challenges that parents face when they have a child with special needs living at home into their adulthood, and they want them to be home, but they're also concerned if something happens to them, the child may need to live somewhere else. Right. And there's this back and forth, and I'm sure you run into that. Any tips that you would give the parents on how to deal with this?
Well, there are services and supports for both styles of managing family life with an individual with special needs. Many families are not prepared at age 21 or 25 to do an out-of-home placement, and for those individuals who want to keep their loved one home, there are push-in services, at-home residential habilitation it's called, where support individuals, professionals come into the home, respite services that give families a break to be able to go away for a weekend or go shopping or take care of other family needs. So those are available, and it's really a blessing when families need that. But at the same time, they need to prepare for the longer run. And that means getting on lists with organizations and with the state agency to make it known that your intention is, within 3 years or 5 years or whatever the family chooses, that you are interested in out-of-home residential placement. It's not unusual for people to wait a good number of years before the right placement becomes available.
Great. I want to thank both of you so much for taking the time to be with us. And thank you, Aaron, and your organization, ACLD, for all the good work that they do. For more information on ACLD, you can go to their website at www.acld.org. When we come back, we will sit down with Rebecca Kooper, who will share her story. Stay with us.
We were a very typical family. My parents moved out to Long Island post-World War II. I have 3 brothers, And we grew up in Elmont and just had a very typical early childhood, which was fun and free and easy. I was 3.5 years old when my brothers were born. They were born 2 months premature, so they were in the hospital for around 2 months until they got to the around 5-pound weight to come home. But I was excited to have 2 little brothers and looking forward to watching them grow up. She first became suspicious that something was wrong with Billy when he was around 1 year old. She thought he was deaf because he was not responsive. So she took him to be tested and they ruled out deafness. But then that left them with this big question, what is it? Because they had no idea what was wrong with him. When I was going over the photos, again looking at them as an adult, and I haven't looked at them for a long time, I was struck by the lack of expression in my brother's face. Consistently. I never saw a photo where he was engaged, where he was looking at anybody. And it was sad for me to see that he was probably very disconnected. And again, probably everyone else did know. But I guess there's something nice about having positive memories. But looking back, it was sad. The first time I was aware that there was a problem was when he stopped eating and went into a coma. And they couldn't wake him up. That's when it started going in and out of hospitals for probably a year or so, I'm not sure. And then when he went to Rockland State Hospital, where he ended up living for a long period of time, I was told it was a hospital. So I just thought it was just one more hospital and that eventually he would come home again. Once as a teenager, I asked my mother, and I was driving home and I was just so upset and I didn't want to say anything because I knew my mother, and I just started crying and I just said, why is he here? And I kind of saw the pain on her face and I knew I shouldn't have asked, but she just said, I had no choice. One day I was at a hairdresser and the woman who was doing my hair told me her husband was a social worker and he was instrumental in starting group homes for people who were living in state institutions. So I went home, told my mother. Within a nanosecond, she was on it, making arrangements for my brother to go into a group home. They were calling it different things then. They were calling it profoundly retarded. They were calling it even schizophrenia. They were calling it neurologically severe neurological damage. They were calling it different names during different decades. So it didn't matter what you called it. It was just somebody who was very low functioning and was just was never going to be able to really communicate and take care of himself and would always need a lot of help. So I knew I had a severely impaired brother. As you see in this picture, we've gotten together for Billy's birthday because it's good for all of us to just have a sense of family. He's still in our family. He knows somehow that we are family members. He doesn't know a sister or a brother or a father, but he knows we've been around for a long time. And when we go to visit him, there's definitely a look of recognition, and it's something extra that's in his life that will always be there. We're the constant.
Welcome back to Family Comes First. Today we are exploring siblings taking care of an adult sibling with special needs.
We are now joined by Rebecca Kooper, who has taken on the responsibility for her brother Billy, who has special needs. Rebecca, so good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've known each other a long time, and it really, truly has been my privilege to provide the legal services and support through the years for your dad and your family. And I really, truly miss your father, Max. He was such a gentleman, a live wire, I'm sure a loving father for you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that in there because I think of him often, really. We get attached to our clients, and he was a special one. And I know it was really difficult for you when he was in declining health with dementia, and you also had to step in and take on that responsibility of overseeing the care of Billy. Can you talk a little about the challenges that you faced at that time?
Well, I do refer to that as my difficult decade. Mm-hmm. It was a horrible time for me emotionally, having lost my mother and then my father's decline, and realizing that I would be handed the baton to take care of Billy. Mm-hmm. It was difficult.
And you were working? at the time
I
as
was
well,
working
right?
at the time, yes.
So, you know, they talk about that sandwich generation of parent and child. Your sandwich
Right.
was
You were right
your
there.
parents and your sibling.
Yes.
And there are more and more people who are finding themselves in that situation.
Yeah, it was confusing. It was overwhelming. I had one parent in one type of facility and a brother in another type of facility. And I was visiting both in each facility, and hopefully I showed up with the right person in the right place.
Right.
But
difficult.
it was hard and it was difficult. And it's something that you have to do when you're presented with the situation.
What planning was implemented by your parents to arrange for Billy's care before they passed?
Well, my mother had brilliantly found out about group homes and had him placed in a group home that I am a group home fan. They are phenomenal. They are caring. They really just manage his life so that I don't have to worry about that, his care. I manage his care through them. We meet often. I call over. If there's a problem, they call me. I am his guardian for his healthcare needs. And I have to be involved with any kind of medical decisions.
Did you know that you were going to be stepping into this role before? Did you have any idea of what it would be like from your parents?
I didn't even think about it when I was younger. It was having grown up with it at around, when I was a teenager, I stopped visiting for quite a few years just to take a break. That's when I started realizing the severity of the situation. And my parents would talk about the visits and I would listen, but I really wasn't too involved. And then my mother one day said to me out of nowhere, I think it's time for you to come see Billy in the group home. There's going to be a picnic. It'll be nice, it'll be pleasant, and it's time. And I wanted to say no, but I said yes. And I went, and my mother passed away a few months later.
So you were selected?
I was selected as this woman, as the female, which seems to be the ones who step up most of the time.
So did your mother have any conversations directly with you before she passed, saying that, Rebecca, I really need for you to show an ongoing interest for Billy on behalf of the
You know
family?
what? We never talked about things. And that's a regret that I have as an adult, but it was an issue that was never talked about. Just that decade, there were no words for it. I think it was too painful for them. I certainly was not bringing anything up. I'm like, la, 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 I can go through life. If you don't want to talk about it, it's okay with me. And because my mother died, as you know, suddenly, she was not sick, there wasn't a time for her to say, I'm getting sick, I think we need to talk. Maybe she knew by having me come and visit and breaking down that barrier of me never having gone into a facility where he was living. Beginning, it was hard. I remember, and it's a beautiful home, but my heart would just beat because it was like going into an institution, and it wasn't, but it was, my body was conditioned, and it took many years before that feeling went away. It's hard.
How has ACLD helped Billy?
ACLD has saved my life.
Wow.
Oh, and Billy too.
And Billy too.
Yeah, they're just there for him. They just take over everything. I'm always impressed with their level of care and planning ahead for the next step.
So what kind of needs does Billy have, and how do you ensure that those needs are being taken care of?
Well, he's very low functioning, so in terms of his needs, he doesn't, it's really his care and his safety and his well-being. And I know he's well cared for because he is nonverbal. You really look at his reaction to people to know if he likes them or not. And when people go by him, if he reaches out to them, I know he likes them. And he does that to the people who are there. So I know he's well cared for. And that's all I want, is for him to be safe and well cared for.
Now, I'm going to shift gears a little because always had that lawyer's hat on. And so, what does it mean to you to be legal guardian of Billy?
What it means to me is that they really can't make any decisions about his care, his health care, without consulting me.
Yeah.
So any important decisions that have to be made, especially in the future, I know we can discuss it, and it won't be, oh, we forgot to call his sister. It's, oh, we have to call his sister before we can move on.
Yeah, so you're guardian of the person.
Yes.
You're the advocate supervising Billy's well-being. Tell us, when did you step in to be the legal guardian, and why was? Talk about the process.
Well,
why was it important?
The process was begun by you, if I recall.
Yes, it was.
It was right immediately after my father's death. We were settling his affairs, and you said to me, so what about Billy's guardianship? And I said, nah, I think I'll take a break because I just took care of my father for a few years. And you said, no, we really need to talk about it. And I asked you why, and you said, if anything dire happens to Billy without having guardianship, the doctors can do whatever they deem useful or important or beneficial, regardless of my feelings would be.
Right.
And that made me very nervous, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And we went ahead and drew up the papers, and I became guardian.
And I recall that soon thereafter an important decision had to be made.
Yes.
And so I know it was important
It was
to you
perfect
to
timing,
have that
and as much as
ability.
I was not happy with you at the beginning for bringing
You
it
weren't
up.
happy with me?
Hard to believe. No, it was
Such a
not
nice
with
guy.
you. It was just the information you were telling me.
Right.
But I was very grateful when that incident came up, and the doctor, we disagreed, and I made a decision with the advice of the people who know Billy best, his caregivers, and some nurses there, to go against the doctor's recommendation. And he was not happy with me, but he had to listen to what I said, and it worked out fine. That by not doing this invasive procedure, Billy was okay, and he was better than he would have been with the procedure.
That's a message I'm
absolutely is.
so glad you shared with us, because